All right, so we're going to begin to make our Chebekia. Now, a quick note, because Chebekia is very involved, it's not something that I make very often. As such, I am doing a little bit of an experiment this time because a very dear friend of mine loves Chebekia and her birthday is coming up, but she is sensitive to gluten. So I'm trying it out to be gluten-free. However, the recipe is going to be using regular wheat flour. So follow the recipe and the instructions. If things don't turn out quite perfectly with this round, then we're going to blame it on the gluten-free flour. That said, you will need 4 cups of flour. If you want to make it gluten-free, do 4 cups of 1-to-1 gluten-free flour and add 2 1/2 teaspoons of xanthan gum. We will need 3/4 of a cup of almonds that have been blanched, 3/4 of a cup of sesame seeds that have been toasted, 1/4 cup of butter melted, 1/4 cup of vegetable oil. We will need 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 1/2 teaspoon cinnamon, 1 1/2 teaspoons of anise, 1 egg yolk, a small pinch of mastic gum, and 1/4 teaspoon of granulated sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of saffron, which you will then crumble, 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, 1/2 cup to 3/4 cup of water, 1/2 cup of orange blossom water, 1/4 cup of white vinegar, a whole lot of honey, and a whole lot more oil in order to fry these. So we're going to start by grinding our almonds and our sesame seeds. You want to do them separately because they're going to grind at different speeds, and use a high-powered blender. You want to grind them into a very fine powder just until you're able to pack them, but not until they become a paste. When you do that, then you'll add them to the flour. So be right back while I grind them, and then we'll continue. Okay, we have everything ground. You can see that if you press the almonds together, it just begins to pack. We're going to add this to the flour. And the same thing for our ground sesame seeds. With your mastic gum and sugar, you want to combine them into a mortar and pestle and grind those up as well. If you've never worked with mastic gum before, it's actually the resin of a tree, most usually found in Greece. It adds a wonderful depth of flavor to whatever you add it to. It's a very subtle flavor, so you want just a little bit. And when you grind it, you need to add the sugar to keep it from just sticking to itself. All right, we're going to add this in as well. And then our salt, baking powder, and spices. So we're going to give this a quick whisk. Make sure everything is well combined. And now we are going to add in our vegetable oil and our melted and cooled butter. Now this part is easiest to do with your hands. Just give it a good mix. And then also add in your egg yolk. Now, obviously this is not enough liquid to make a cohesive dough yet, and that is just fine. We're not looking for that yet. We just want something that has kind of a sand-like texture. Be sure to scoop down to the bottom, make sure that everything is well mixed. And we want the flour to begin to absorb some of this liquid. So we're going to cover it with a kitchen towel and allow it to sit for 30 minutes. While that is happening, in a small pot, you want to combine 1/2 cup of water, 1/4 cup of white vinegar, and 1/2 cup of orange blossom water. You're then going to add in your saffron, and we're going to take this over to the stove and bring it to a light simmer. Once it reaches a simmer, turn off the heat and just allow the saffron to steep while our cookies rest, our flour mixture rests. So we will see you in 30 minutes. Okay, it's been 30 minutes, so now we're going to take our cooled liquid and add it to our flour mixture. And we're going to knead this for 7 to 8 minutes. Now, before I had mentioned that it was 1/2 cup to 3/4 cup of water. So if you need more water for this to come together, by all means, add a little bit at a time, just like you would with a bread dough. You want to get it to a smooth, pliable dough. So I'm going to use my stand mixer as always, but of course, traditionally this is done by hand. So I will see you in 7 to 8 minutes. So it's been 8 minutes, and of course, as I had mentioned before, this is my gluten-free experiment, and so I needed to add 3/4 cup more water. And as you can see, it is still a little bit crumbly, not quite as smooth as it would be if it had that wonderful gluten in there. Xanthan gum can only do so much, but it looks like it roughly should. So what we're going to do is divide this into 4, wrap it in plastic wrap, and let it rest for another 15 minutes. All right, it's been 15 minutes. So now what we're going to do, unwrap one ball at a time, and you want to roll it out not terribly thin, maybe about 1/4 of an inch. And you're going to take your cornstarch and sprinkle it over your dough. Now, from the end, you're going to fold up 1/4 and then again and again and again until it is all folded. Once again, this is more delicate, so I'm going to use some assistance. So there's about 1/4. And again, and one more time. Okay, now we're going to turn it 90 degrees and roll it out again. And again, if you're making regular Chebekia with regular gluten wheat flour, you will have no problem with this. It's not going to be this delicate of a dough, because those gluten bonds will have formed. Now, once again, sprinkle it with some cornstarch, and again, fold up 1/4 another quarter, and the final. Wrap this back up in plastic. And we're gonna let it rest for another 15 minutes. Now let's take care of these other 3. Okay, it's been another 15 minutes. Our dough has rested, and what we're going to do is work with half at a time. And what we want to do is roll this out very thin. Now, if you have a pasta roller, that's going to be the best thing. Otherwise, you want to roll it out until no more than 1/16 of an inch. Now, thankfully I have a pasta roller because this dough is a little iffy, but I did some research and you can make gluten-free pasta, so I should be able to do this. Now, with the pasta roller, I'm going to start with a 2. Actually, you know, I'm going to start with a 1 in this case. Normally, you're going to start with a 2. I don't even think I have it quite enough. All right, since this is gluten-free, it looks like I'm not going to be able to use the pasta roller. So if you're making the regular, I absolutely recommend doing this. You want to roll it at a 2, then a 3, and finally to a 5. And that's going to be the perfect, nice thinness to give you the crispy cookie that we're looking for. However, this gluten-free is giving me a bit more trouble. So I'm going to roll it as thin as I feel comfortable with, which is not as thin as you really want the regular cookies. And what we're going to do is use our Chebekia cutters. Of course, these are really difficult to find in the US. So what you can do instead is just use a rotary cutter, preferably a fluted one, and cut squares that have these 4 different lines in the middle. And you see they're about, 1/4 inch left from the edge. And what this is going to do is give you this square where you have 5 strips all connected at the top and the bottom. Now, this is the part that may take a couple tries to get down. So you're going to lace your fingers through the 1st, 3rd, and 5th of the strands. Then you're on this outer one, you're going to pinch the 2 corners together. Then you are going to take this final one and kind of fold it over everything. Again, gluten-free, not quite as durable. So let's see if I can do something approximate. That looks like a good approximation. You're going to pinch the top and bottom to bring it together. So we're going to set this aside and repeat. Now you can re-roll the scraps as long as the dough is still pliable. So let me show you one more time. And again, this is about twice as thick as you want it for the regular. So first, third, and fifth. Pinch together these two corners, and then you want to kind of turn it inside out. So that first and second one are essentially framing all the ones in the middle, and you pinch those corners. If you do have Chebekia cutters, usually it comes with 2 sizes, which is great. It allows you to avoid re-rolling as often. I will confess I am very concerned with how these are going to fry, but we will give it a shot. Well, that turned a little messy, which is common. All right. One more. Maybe I need to stick to the large cutters. Yeah, for these gluten-free ones, I'm going to stick with the large cutters. So if you're making gluten-free, make sure to make it about, what, 2 inches tall? Or is that 3 by 2? Something like that. So use the larger size if you're doing gluten-free. If you're doing regular, doesn't matter, your dough will be nice and pliable. All right, let me finish the rest of these and then we'll be back to fry them. Okay, because the cookies are so very fragile, I don't really want to take care of all the dough before I bake or fry them all. So I'm going to start frying them now. If you're using wheat flour, then absolutely you can get them all done and then fry them. So you will want to heat any oil that is suitable for frying. I'm using vegetable oil, but canola oil, grapeseed oil, any of them will work. Now you want to carefully put your cookies into the oil. If you don't have something like I do that automatically regulates the temperature, you want it to come to 365 degrees. And I would recommend using a thermometer to help keep it at temperature. You don't want to get it too high because then it's going to burn the cookies before they can cook. You don't want it too low because then it's going to absorb the oil instead of quickly frying. So it's going to take about 5 minutes to fry the cookies to a deep golden brown. And this is something that if you are doing the gluten flour, you are going to need to flip them to make sure they cook evenly because they will be flatter and they will want to have one side up. You also want a pot of honey and orange blossom water. I usually start with 2 cups of honey and 1 tablespoon of orange blossom water and then refill it as it goes on because I don't want to use too much. And once the cookies are fried after about 5 minutes, you will take them out of the oil, drain off as much water as you can, and then soak them in the honey. When the next round of cookies is almost ready to come out, what you'll want to do is transfer them to a colander over a bowl. These are done, so we're going to tip that out. This will drain off the excess honey because even though there's no sugar except for the little bit with the mastic gum in the cookies themselves, they are very sweet. They don't need even more honey in them. So after you have drained them, you should sprinkle them with sesame seeds. This is, of course, a very long process. If you are making the wheat Chebekia, because you can get the dough so thin, it's going to give you about 5 dozen cookies. This gluten-free version, it looks like it's going to be more about maybe 2 to 3 dozen. However, they are well worth the effort, and the good thing is they freeze very well. So if you would like to try one of the favorite Moroccan cookies and a Ramadan staple, I highly encourage you to do so. All right, look at these. Aren't they so gorgeous? I am so happy with the way these turned out. It was a little uncertain there while I was trying to roll them out, but they were a success. Nice and brown. They're not crumbly the way that they were before they were cooked. Because they're not as thin, they don't have the crisp that regular Chebekia have, but they're not too thick, they're not soft, they're not stodgy, they're not too much. They are delicious, they taste amazing, and I am so excited that this experiment worked. So, to the question of, can you make Chebekia gluten-free? Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me.